So, I will be doing a presentation on public key encryption. Let's get started. What is encryption? Well, it's a technique that pretty much conceals the message inside what you're sending. So, if you're sending a simple plain text message called hello, that message will be then encrypted, and then a new message will be created, will be a ciphertext, and inside that ciphertext will be just random gibberish. Instead of hello, will be JK and Q instead. This technique is pretty much a way to protect sensitive information inside. So instead of the simple hello, imagine a credit card information, imagine social security number, imagine birth certificate information, any private information. That thing could be encrypted, of course. Now, this technique, of course, is pretty much the most reliable technique to be used for data security purposes. Now, cryptography, they used a different technique, which is not a different technique, but a new, more of a, let's say, communication purposes for two people. So, for cryptography, say Bob has, of course, the hello message, and he wants to send it to Sally. But in order for Bob to send it, he would need to use a key called an encryption key. Once he uses the encryption key, that message would be then turned into a ciphertext, and then that ciphertext will be sent to Sally. Of course, Sally on her end would need a device called a decryption key. And she will need to use that key to decrypt what's inside the information, and then it will be decrypted and it will become the message that will be saying hello instead of gibberish words. Now, this technique, of course, follows the protocol of the CIA triad, which was authentication, confidentiality, and integrity. What are the public keys and private keys? Public keys are pretty much encrypted information. It's available to several people around the world, and not around the world, but like to the group. It verifies digital signatures, proof of validation and authentication. It's a secure communication, and enables password authentication and key agreements. Private key, of course, is your own thing. So, for example, if the only way so Bob will have to, of course, decrypt that information using his private key. Now, if Sally did not have a private key, then she would not be able to unlock the data, and it will be it will be lost for her. But since she did, she will be able to use it, and that's how she has the private key. Now, cryptography has pretty much been happening for a long time, very, very long time. So, for example, the ancient Spartans, they used a device called the skytail, which is a loin wrapped around a wooden rod, and that has a secret message encoded inside. Now, however, the loin wrap was not that great, because if you unwrap it and try to wrap it back in, or falls off, it will not. You will have a hard time decrypting what the message was. So that was the ancient Spartans' time. Then came Julius Caesar and the ancient Romans. What they did, Julius Caesar used a cipher that shifts several shifts characters by 3 places. So instead, like for letter B and D, it will become letter E in the end. Charles Whitstone, he created a Playfair cipher, which, of course, encrypts pairs of letters and will make it hard for people to crack it. And back in the 1900s, we had machines that were interesting, especially in what Herbert used in 1917. Herbert would create a device where in turn, where like when you type the information on the little keyboard right here, for example, something else will be typed instead on this little machine. And that way, whatever you're typing will be typed something else and will be decrypted pretty much. So now we come to symmetric and asymmetric. What are symmetrics? Symmetrics are pretty much secret keys that could be either be a number, string, text, or random characters. It's blended with plain text in the message to change the context of it. Both sender and receiver know that the secret key, and that way they will encrypt and decrypt all the messages. Asymmetric uses two separate keys, a public key and a private key. The public key encrypts the data, while the private key decrypts the data. The methods that asymmetric relies on are authenticating the parties, verifying the data integrity, and exchanging symmetric keys. So in this picture right here, we got two examples: symmetric encryption, exchanging symmetric keys, and asymmetric. We got the public key encrypts, private key decrypts. Right there. Now, the difference between these two, symmetric encryption is an old model technique, while asymmetric is a new model technique. Pretty much in general, old school versus new school. Symmetric transmits big data. Asymmetric transmits small data. Asymmetric takes longer to execute since the logic is complex. Symmetric uses a key that needs to be shared among the people, while, of course, asymmetric uses pair public and a private key to encrypt the data information. So my experience in encrypting and decrypting, I had a project called the RSA, which I had to use a technique called RSA, public key coding. So I had a partner that helped me out, and we exchanged this information again. So, for example, in the first step, I had to create my own. First, I had to select my first prime number and my second prime number. I chose 137 and 239, and my modulus was created by random. It was randomly generated by my choosing of these two numbers. So it's 32,743 and 32,368. Then I had to choose a public key based on the prime number of my first prime number. So I chose 9, and my private key was created, which was 7193. Then my partner, he gave me his modulus and his public key also. Public key will be mine right here, and my modulus will be this, for example. So for me, I created a plain text, which is Guts and Griffith, and for him, and for me, that message will be created as a ciphertext for me. So in my case, when I use my modulus and my private key on my end, I decrypted his text, and it was called public key coding. It's pretty much a simple technique for decrypting the information. And here is my reference page, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you.